Workers tearing up the basement floor found a 1950s diner booth sealed in concrete, 2 mugs of coffee still steaming, 1 chair pulled slightly back, no bodies, no door. No smell, just a red lipstick stain on the rim and a half-smoked cigarette, still burning in an ashtray. 41 years later, a plumber went down to fix the new piping, then came up shaking, whispering that the jukebox played a song that hadn't been written yet. He'd recorded it. In the reflection on the chrome napkin holder, someone else was sitting in his seat. You shouldn't have read this far. It starts playing again at 2:17 a.m. It began with a sound no one else heard beneath the saw beneath. The chatter beneath the playlist on the Bluetooth speaker shoved in a paint-stained bucket. Raymond kept kneeling even after the drill stopped. His hand hovered an inch above the unfinished slab like it could feel a heartbeat below the concrete. It wasn't warm. But it wasn't still either. The others had moved upstairs. Coffee break. He stayed behind, claiming he had to finish sealing the junction between the old plumbing and the new drain line. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He didn't trust the blueprints. They'd given him the floor plan a week ago dated 1964. Revised in 1982, but the foundation was older than that. You could tell by the grain of the wood beams. In the crawl space. They were blackened, soft, not by water, but by age. There was no note about the southern wall curve. No mention of the alcove where he'd found the capped pipe with red wax, and no record, none at all, of the seam it cut. Through the basement like a scar someone tried to stitch closed with a level and a lie. Perfectly linear, but it didn't line up with the rest of the foundation. Raymond had poured enough slabs in his life to know when a floor was lying. He tapped it again with the handle of the crowbar. Hollow, once, twice, then a third, time different. Not an echo, not a thud, a hum. Almost like a breath under glass. He didn't call the crew. Instead, he dragged the compressor closer and chipped around the edge with a hand tool, gentle, controlled. The top layer came away like shell plaster thin. Beneath it, a smoother surface, darker, dustless. Polished? Marble? No, not marble, it was tile. Black and white checkerboard, not chipped, not cracked, not even dirty. Clean enough to reflect. His eyes back at him, except he looked up. The lights hadn't changed, but the reflection in the tile showed a different bulb. Round, warmer, like an old diner light. He brushed more dust aside. There was a chrome edge under the grout line curved, like a table corner. He thought of booths. 1950s, cafes, trucker. Stops. A memory floated up from nowhere. His mother humming Blue Moon over a sugar packet tower she let him build when they still had money. He chipped further. The surface widened. The curve grew. Then he saw it. 2 coffee mugs. Porcelain, 1. Red, 1 black. Still steaming. His fingers shook, not from fear, not yet, but from the cold absence of dust. There was no debris on the table. No cobwebs on the salt shaker. The sugar jar still had its lid, and the spoon beside it was clean. His radio crackled. He hadn't touched it. No one was near it. The volume knob spun slightly, like breath had passed too close. Ray, a voice came through. It wasn't familiar. Too young, too slow. Then it repeated. Not the name, the static. The same exact. Hiss. Looped. He turned the radio off. He turned around. The doorway behind him looked wrong. He could see the kitchen through it, but the shadows didn't fall right. The light bled through too slow, like syrup down wallpaper. And on the fridge, taped to the side, was a photograph. He walked toward it slowly, unsure when it had appeared. Picture was old, curled at the corners. It showed 3 people in a booth, 2 smiling, 1 not. He squinted. The man on the left had a scar on his chin, one Raymond recognized. It was his father, younger, but definitely him. The woman beside him his mother? Maybe, but her hair was wrong. The third figure had their face turned. He peeled the photo from the fridge. Something was written on the back, 2:17 a.m., order never taken. He checked the time on his phone. 2:13 p.m., the number still at CHED. Behind him, the smell changed. Not dust, not mold, but warmth, coffee, fresh, and something older. Vanilla? Tobacco? He turned back toward the exposed booth, and the chair had moved. Not much, just enough, just back an inch, as if someone had pushed it out to sit. A tiny scrape in the dust from the grout. He backed away too fast and bumped a cabinet that hadn't been there before. Drawers, rusted, locked. He pulled one. It opened too easily. Inside, a child's shoe, white, bow laces. Brand new, no dirt, no tag. But he knew he had seen that shoe before. In a photo, on a missing poster. Taped to a pole near his school in 1996, the radio turned on again. Coffees. Still hot. A girl's voice whispered. He dropped the drawer. Its echo was too long. It didn't match the room. It didn't match the walls. It sounded like it fell in a hallway 10 times deeper. Then faint he heard it. A knock. 3. Slow. From under the slab. He ran up the stairs. Past the fresh drywall. Past the paint buckets and the smeared blueprints. He didn't stop until he was outside, in the cold that no longer felt clean. When he finally looked down at the blueprint rolled under his arm, he noticed something. The edge had bled through. Scratched. Pressed. A mark not drawn in ink, but etched. Like someone dragged a key across the paper. A room. A square room. No label. No door. No architect's name. Just 3 words in trembling pencil. Don't take her order. And beneath it, smaller. You already did. The door shouldn't have closed behind him. Raymond turned anyway, slow, hesitant, but the latch had caught. No breeze, no draft, just that old kind of hush buildings carry when no one remembers their name. The concrete slab was gone now, lifted and hauled out piece by piece. In its place sat the impossible. A pristine diner booth embedded deep beneath the foundation. Chrome edges. Teal. Leather, the kind of color that only exists in memory. And on the formica table between the 2 seats, a mug, still steaming. He hadn't told the others what he'd seen. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They'd call it stress. Or worse, hallucination. But the steam was real. It coiled upward and delicate. Spirals, perfect and patient. Like it knew it was being watched. He stepped down onto the tile. It didn't creak or groan. It received his weight like it had been waiting for it. Like he was late. The smell was old, rich. Dark roast. But there was something else beneath it. Paper, mildew, lipstick wax, and starch. He didn't know how to name the scent properly, but he'd smelled it once before in a sealed box in his mother's attic. A box that had held a burnt photo of her sister, the one no one ever mentioned. He approached the mug. A ring of lipstick clung to the rim, bright red, unnaturally precise. A kiss that hadn't smudged. A claim. He didn't touch it. But he felt the heat rising from it. Next to the mug sat a small notepad, check slip style. Faded lines, no writing. But an impression remained in the paper, visible only at a slant. He tilted it beneath the overhead bulb. Order, 2 eggs, rye toast. Do not ask her about the window. Raymond blinked. Read it again, same words. Same warning. He turned toward the booth's far seat. The cushion bore a shallow impression, as if someone had just risen a moment before. And the chair across from it, his side, had been pulled back, not in disarray, not abandoned. Just pulled back, waiting. The silence pressed tighter now. The kind of silence where thoughts grow teeth. To his right, the wall should have been stone. But it was mirror, wider than the booth. Full length, seamless. It reflected the booth. The mug, the seat, but not him. He stood in front of it. No distortion, no blur, just absence. And on the mirrored wall, just beneath the height of a child's hand, a print appeared. Slowly, fogged breath against glass. A soft circle, then 4 smudged fingers. Raymond stepped back. He wasn't breathing. The handprint remained to the left of the mirror. What he'd mistaken for paneling revealed itself as something else entirely. A drawer, shallow, no handle. But it opened when he pressed gently with 2 fingers. Inside, a hymn, torn from a book, folded 4 times. Burnt around the edges, but legible. They know not what they buried. His hands trembled. He unfolded the page further and saw scrawled, in a different hand beneath the hymn's final line, "They told us it was a drill." A noise stirred behind the booth, a soft drag. Like shoes too small on tile. He didn't turn. He couldn't. Instead, he stared at the drawer. The inside lining was red velvet, faded, dustless. In the velvet's center lay a child's shoe. Left foot, patent leather, strap undone. Size too small for walking far. Taped beneath the shoe, yellowed and peeling, was a photograph. Raymond took it. The image was clear. A girl, maybe 7, sitting at the booth. Alone, her face half turned, smiling. Her dress white with lace collar was identical to the ones worn in a photograph that had hung in his primary school cafeteria for years. But that picture had shown a group 30 students standing outside the St. Elizabeth Residential Hall, all gone now. Building condemned, names redacted. He flipped the photo. In pencil, Lucy, lunch February 17th, 84, seat still warm. Raymond's stomach turned. His mother's maiden name was written beneath the date. There was no date on the calendar that matched the demolition log. No records after 1983. The booth's cushion hissed behind him. He spun. Nothing had moved. But the steam from the mug had stopped rising, and beside it now, where there had been nothing, a second mug had appeared. Empty. No lipstick. Just a hairline crack that curved around the base. It hadn't been there before. His breath caught. The cracked mug began to fog inside, like it was colder than the air. Or something inside it was exhaling. From the mirror, the reflection now included him. But not as he was. He wore a work shirt stained with something dark. Not blood. Something worse. Rust? Ink? Memory? Behind him, in the reflection, the girl from the photo now sat at the booth, staring into the mug with the crack. Her mouth moved, but the sound came from the floor vent. He dropped the photo, bent to retrieve it, and saw another sheet of paper tucked beneath the booth's base. He pulled it out. A typewritten page, broken at the edges, redacted in 4 lines. Interview transcript. Survivor ID 22B location. Ward 6 unrecorded. She always sat there. Every drill, every lockdown. Always same seat. Did she speak? Not words, just hums. Like the jukebox. You said she left in 84. No, I said that's when they said she left. I saw her last 2 days ago. Booth was still warm. The recording light on Raymond's phone blinked. He didn't remember starting it, but it was recording. And beneath, the room tone, the silence, the breath. A whisper crackled through the static. Soft, childlike. Don't sit there. The booth cushion indented, slowly. Without a body, and the mirror showed. Both mugs full, both steaming. And both facing him. The box had no label. Raymond found it tucked behind a stack of warped yearbooks, in a room the blueprints didn't list. It shouldn't have been there, between the old cafeteria pantry and the boiler room. There was no entrance before, no door. But this morning, there was a crack in the drywall. Hairline. Moving. The box was heavy, blackened by soot on one side. The lid didn't creak when opened, just slid too easily. Inside, photographs, dozens, glossy and square, Polaroids mostly. A few were curled at the edges like they'd tried to pull away from something they weren't supposed to remember. He pulled one, a diner, that booth. The teal leather was unmistakable, now stitched identically to the one beneath the foundation. On the far seat sat a waitress smiling, hair curled, apron crisp, her hands mid-pour, holding a coffee pot just above the lip of a white ceramic mug. Raymond had seen her face before. He didn't know her name, but the photo itself made the back of his throat ache. He turned it over. No note, just a pencil mark, 1973, morning shift. She looked maybe 20. That same youthful glow they always freeze in time before the bruises, before the rot. Except he had seen that same face in another photograph, on a wall, in the hallway of St. Elizabeth's, the year he enrolled. But it had been 1992. Class portrait had listed a girl with the same smile, same eyes, her name printed beneath in tiny serif, Mara Tellinger. He'd thought she was a teacher's daughter, or a nun in training. He searched the box faster now, pulled more, dozens of her, in different dresses, but always the same apron, the same half turn to the camera. And in every photo, the background never aged, the booth, the same one. The mugs stayed. Even the window outside showed the same blurred tree. Autumn, always. He found 2 yearbooks wedged in the bottom of the box, cloth-bound, red tape across the spines. Class of 1973. Class of 1983. He flipped through. Pages had stuck together. From moisture, but most were legible. He didn't look at names, not yet. He looked at faces. Mara Tellinger. In both. The same photo. The exact same smile. Identical hair, not similar identical, 10 years apart. He dropped the books. Breathed, didn't realize until then he hadn't. Taken a breath in maybe 2 minutes. Above him, the single light bulb flickered. The filament buzzed. A hum under it, soft, looping, like a diner jukebox warming up without a song to play. Raymond turned. Something else was in the box. A folder. Redacted in swaths of black ink, stamped, "Archival use only, do not release without clerical signature." He opened it. Inside were staff logs, typed, tidy, names listed beside work shifts and assigned duties. Mara Tellinger, server rotation. Hall D listed 17 times between 1971 and 1995, each decade. Unchanged handwriting, same department, same extension number. But Hall D didn't exist anymore. It had been walled off in the renovation of '87, after the explosion they never spoke of. On one shift report, she was signed out at 2:17 a.m. under emergency closure. No context. Just that time, repeating, in margins, stamped, circled. He remembered something too quickly, like it had waited in the dark. "We don't sit there after 2. The sentence had come from a janitor, whispered during his 3rd month at St. Elizabeth's. They don't like it. When Raymond asked who they were, the man said nothing, just placed a hand on the chapel wall and muttered, "Still." Warm, Raymond stood, yearbooks under one arm, photo folder in hand. Outside the door, the one that hadn't been there before, he paused. There was something taped to it. A burnt photo. Edges crisped, the center intact. Mara again. Serving coffee. And across from her, the customer, head down, hands folded, face obscured. But the right hand, the wrist, wore a green silicone watch band, faded, scratched. It was Raymond's, same. Scar beneath the joint, same square fingernails. Same shirt. Same phone in hand. It was a photograph from 1973, of now. He didn't remember taking it. But in the photo, Mara was looking at him, finally turned. No smile. Mouth parted slightly, as if she had just said something. He turned the photo over. No pencil this time, just a sentence, scratched in with something sharp. "This isn't your first visit." He staggered back. The air in the hallway shifted. Cooler. Now dense, like the basement had remembered how to breathe through concrete again. He dropped the books. Didn't care. A sound echoed behind the door. Something slid across tile, slowly. Chair legs pulled back. Not pushed. Inviting. He didn't open the door. But he didn't move away either. Light bled through the frame. Soft amber, diner light. Faint. Static followed. A looped whisper, familiar now. Faint as steam off ceramic. He pressed the recorder on his phone. Out of instinct. Out of fear. The speaker cracked. Then a voice. Female. Soft. Cream or no cream. His chest burned. She hadn't spoken in the other photos. Not once, but the voice sounded real, present, nearby. The door creaked. Just a breath. Just enough to reveal a sliver of teal leather, and the corner of a tray balanced on a forearm. Mara's apron peeked through the crack, freshly starched. The same coffee stain on the left edge. She always faced the camera. Except once, and in the photo Raymond had just seen. She was looking away. At something, or someone behind him. He turned, and the mirror at the end of the corridor, cracked and smeared with dust, showed two shadows. His and hers. Only she wasn't behind him. She was seated. And pouring, right hand lifted. Wrist bent, serving coffee, to the man holding the plumber's phone. The jukebox hadn't been in the booth yesterday. Raymond was certain. The photos, the footage, everything he'd recorded had shown nothing but the booth, the mirror, the steaming mugs. But now in the back corner beneath the ductless vent, a chrome-faced Rockola machine stood humming. No cords. No outlet nearby. No dust on its feet. It faced inward, not out toward the room, positioned as if someone had wheeled it in, then forgotten to leave. The song selection buttons were intact. Names of tracks etched in uneven lettering, some typed, some handwritten. One simply scratched in with a knife. He stepped toward it. The lights inside flickered faintly, like something trapped was trying to remember how to glow. None of the titles made sense. This room remembers too much. Supper bells at 3 a.m. She said it wouldn't hurt this time. The bottom row was missing. Letters entirely, only grooves where plastic had once held in the names. He bent closer. The glass fogged gently where his face hovered. The kind of fog made by inside breath. His phone buzzed. Just once, a notification. Voice memo. REC_0217 AM_01. He hadn't hit record. Not consciously. He played it back, static, then a low hum. Not a mechanical one, a note, pure and painful, like a child's voice humming beneath the floor. Then the sound shifted. A piano, soft, deliberate, followed by footsteps on tile, slow, not approaching, just pacing. Then, you forgot the hymn. Whispered, female, and then silence. Raymond's hands trembled as he lowered the phone. He stared at the machine. It hadn't played anything aloud, but the tune was in the room now, nestled in the vents. Holding still, he pressed the button for track D3. You were there when I was buried. It didn't click. It inhaled. The lights dimmed only slightly. Not enough to scare. Just enough to make the edges of the booth feel farther away. And then, from the jukebox, music began. Low fidelity. Warbly, as if it had been recorded on magnetic tape buried for decades. The melody was familiar in that wrong way, half nursery. Rhyme, half eulogy. Something sung by a woman who had no breath left, but kept singing out of grief alone. He turned slowly toward the mirror. This time, it didn't show him. It showed the booth years ago. The glass captured light that wasn't present, clothing styles that hadn't been worn in decades. In the mirror, a young boy sat alone, legs swinging. White button shirt, church shine shoes. He knew that boy. It was him, but younger than his. Memories aloud. And the child wasn't alone. A woman stood beside the table, pouring coffee into an empty mug. Her face was blurred, not by smudge, by motion. Like memory refusing to be still, Raymond stepped back. The music continued, notes circling the ceiling now. Soft like breath fog on glass, he saw the hymn first wedged into the booth seat seam. Torn, once again, same one. Page 94. He pulled it free. The hand that feeds must never shake. The margin held a note in red pen. Check the drawer beneath the sugar bin. There hadn't been a drawer before, but when he turned, the jukebox had shifted. Slightly, as if it had nudged forward, or as if something behind it had pulled it out an inch too far. He knelt there. At the base was a compartment, seamless, no visible handle. But the crack in the frame, the same hairline fracture he'd seen in the basement wall days earlier, ran across the panel. He pressed it. It clicked inward. The drawer opened. Inside, a leather-bound logbook, hospital style. Pages brittle at the edges, ink faded by mildew. The cover read, Diner Patient Rotation Ward G, Floor -1, Patient. Not customer. The first page held names. Too many, crossed out. Initials that matched the yearbook from 1973. Some names reappeared later, circled. Some reappeared in different handwriting altogether. Each line ended with one of two notes, stayed past 217, or pulled before mirror turned. He flipped faster. Then stopped. Page 74. Telling her, Mara, return to shift. No record of departure. Memory split visible. Song initiated. Booth maintained. Below the entry, someone had scrawled in a different hand. She doesn't remember being hired, just seated. The music had shifted again. Now the song playing held lyrics. A woman's voice, barely audible, flat, mechanical, exhausted. If you drink it down, you won't remember. If you leave your name, you can't return. Booths are made of borrowed time. Mugs are warm, but never yours. He froze. Those weren't lyrics. They were spoken instructions. The jukebox crackled. A photograph slid from the open drawer, fluttering to the floor, face down. He picked it up. It showed a man seated in the booth. Profile only. The waitress was standing beside him, holding a mug. Her face not blurred this time, clear, soft, kind, younger than he expected. The apron was unstained. Raymond flipped the photo. February 17th, 25. Playback started. Subject unaware. Underlined twice. He looked back at the jukebox. The glass was fogged. Again. But this time, on the outside, a handprint. Small, childlike. Beside it, in the condensation, 4 words written in fingertip streaks. You came back again. Raymond didn't remember ever being here before, but something deep inside his bones did. He crouched by the drawer again, ran his hand along the felt lining. There scratched faintly into the wood. You were there when I was buried. The cabinet hadn't been touched in decades. Not just closed sealed. Raymond found it beneath the stairs behind a wall with no hinges. He hadn't meant to find it. The light through the cracked door caught a glint in the linoleum, and when he followed it, the panel gave way with a slow sigh, as if it had grown tired of hiding. Inside, a single shelf, dustless, cold. 7 reel-to-reel tapes, labeled in the same careful hand. Lunch Rush, February 17th, different years beneath each. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Lined up with priestly neatness beside a single recorder, the kind you'd find in an old therapy office or interrogation room. Beneath it, a worn instruction card. Do not rewind. Do not record over. Do not stop until silence ends. Raymond's hand shook as he loaded the 1973 reel. He didn't know why he started with that one. Or maybe he did. The tape whirred to life with a sound like breath through teeth. Then noise, familiar, unfamiliar, clatter, forks, plates, chatter, voices laughing, soft. A woman calls out an order. Table 5, 2 grilled cheese, no crusts. There's a bell. A ding like in every old diner. We're out of orange. Tell them. The sound swelled. No distortion. No hiss. Then abruptly, everything stops. No clicks. No static. Just silence. No one breathes. Raymond leaned in, as if closeness would unlock the secret inside the stillness. 8 minutes passed. And then knocking. Slow, singular, not on a door. On glass. Tap. 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 Tap the tape. He shouldn't have, but he couldn't listen to that final knock again. He ejected the reel with shaking fingers. It left behind a smear of condensation on the recorder's head, as if something inside the tape had exhaled into the machine. He reached for the next 1979. He hesitated, then took a photo of the tapes, time-stamped, proof, something to anchor this in the real doc. Then he played it. Same start, chatter, laughter, the same voice as before but deeper, slower. Table 5-2 grilled cheese, no crusts. Identical, word for word, but different tones. Different breath patterns. Like the voice was aging in reverse. Another bell, then soft piano, from nowhere, from under the clatter. A tune he recognized but couldn't name. Something sung to him once, long ago, in a room with steel walls and no clocks. Then forks drop, simultaneously. The clink of metal on tile. Then, nothing, not just silence. Pressure, like a vacuum had entered the room. Then, again knocking. But this time it was closer. Raymond stopped the tape again. This time, less sure of his hands, he sat back. Listened to the stillness of the room, then noticed something odd. A drawer beneath the recorder. It hadn't been there before. No knob, no handle. But the seam ran across the base like a mouth held shut. He pulled it. Inside, a single torn hymn, folded and marked in the corner. Those who eat forget. Those who listen remember, but not for long. A name written beneath, shaky and red. M. Tellinger. He reached in. His fingers brushed something else, a small child's shoe, untied. Black patent leather. Size 6. He set it beside the hymn. Too carefully, there were no children in any of the tapes. No sound of small feet. No giggles. Just plates and forks in the same repeated line. Grilled cheese. No crusts. He played the 1984 reel. But this time, something changed. The moment the tape began, the lights dimmed. Barely. Just enough to notice shadows move where no one stood. The mirror across the room. G-day. Not slowly. Like something had leaned forward against it. He turned. The mirror had been clear before. And now a handprint, palm up, fingers spread. Slight smudge at the wrist, like someone had slipped when pressed. On the tape, a male voice began to hum, low, dissonant. A tune that never resolved. Then, do you remember the drill? The voice was not part of the diner. It wasn't ambient. It was intentional. Spoken near the recorder. As if whispered just behind the mic. Then static. Then nothing. Raymond stopped the tape. The drawer beneath the recorder clicked closed on its own. He stood. Slowly. His phone vibrated again. Another voice memo. 0217 AM_loop_3. He hadn't recorded anything, but it played itself from the phone's speaker. If the food's still warm, she's not done serving. A woman's voice, kind, neutral, practiced out like a nurse or a therapist. He looked around the room. The temperature had dropped. Breath fog now hovered just in front of him, but he wasn't breathing. The fog wasn't his. His eyes flicked to the last tape. The one marked 22.5. He shouldn't have picked it up. But he did. There was no year beneath it. Just one word, scratched. And with something sharp, replay. He turned the reel in his hands. Something was stuck to the underside of the box. Yellowed. Paper. A folded log. He peeled it off. Unfolded it. A therapist's session notes. Patient. R. Caldwell. Date. Unconfirmed. Audio fragment only observation. Patient describes persistent dreams involving institutional cafeteria with no exit. Claims memory of silent meal repeatedly. Inserted into unrelated recollections, for example, first kiss, funeral, traffic stop. Describes mirror that reflects only versions of himself seated. States repeated dream phrase, don't eat, don't listen. Just knock. At the bottom, barely legible, patient reports dreams of stainless steel walls closing in. The final sentence was underlined, and on the back of the sheet, in shaky red pen, replay begins at 2:17 a.m. whether you press play or not. There was no name in the file, just a number. L-3, subject 94 redacted twice. Once in pen, then with correction tape peeled halfway off by moisture, revealing nothing useful, only the edge of a looping E beneath what looked like the word danger. Raymond had found the folder behind a false panel in the library. Wall between volumes of hymnals too brittle to open. The panel had been sealed shut with white paint, but cracked under the pressure of his breath, not his hand. As if it wanted out. Inside were napkins. Stacks of them. Each folded into quarters. Each marked in crayon, child's crayon, waxy and dull, the kind only institutions order in bulk. They weren't random doodles. They were all the same. Booth, teal leather, 2 mugs on the table. One red, one black. The details didn't change. The stitching, the ceiling light reflection, even the chipped tile under the table drawn in identical placement. But the people in the sketches did, or rather they multiplied. At first, just one figure seated, a man maybe. Hair like a shadow. No face. Then another, smaller, childlike, facing away, then 3, 4. By the 12th napkin, the table was surrounded on all sides. And one chair was turned toward the artist, direct, fixed, watching. Each napkin had a date. They weren't in order. Some were marked 1981, others 1973. A few bore future dates, 2025, 2033. One was labeled only with a time, 2:17 a.m. No child had handwriting like that. Too exact. Too vertical. The folder's final page held a brief memo. Patient draws location daily. Claims she's seen it in reflections and sleep. Drawing prohibited. Recurs regardless. Recommend room reassignment. Wall E SOUNDPROOFED. OUNDPROOFED. Pressed his fingers to the page. The ink bled onto his skin. Still wet, but the file had been sealed shut since 1989. Behind him, the air shifted. Not a breeze, just weight changing shape. He turned. The study table by the wall now had something on it. Another napkin, fresh, centered, unfolded. Still warm. He hadn't heard anyone enter. It showed the booth. Again. But this time, the figure sitting at the table wasn't a stranger. It was him, drawn in jagged lines, yet unmistakable. The curve of his jaw, the scar above his brow. And next to him, a girl, not Mara, someone smaller, hair parted in 2 tight braids. No face, just the outline of her hand holding a red crayon. He reached for the napkin, but froze, a drawer beneath. The table, the one that hadn't been there before, clicked open on its own. Inside, a photograph. Burnt at the edges, he pulled it gently. The image had mostly held, a classroom, institutional beige. Bulletin board torn at one corner. Rows of children in identical clothes, uniforms. One girl sat apart from the others. Her chair turned slightly. Napkin in her lap, head down. Crayon in hand. The table was the wrong shape. Round, not rectangular. But the sketch she held showed the diner booth. The same red mug. The same shadow figure in the mirror. No other child seemed to notice her. The back of the photo read, "She's not in the enrollment log." Stop seating her near the windows. Raymond closed the drawer. It didn't resist. It simply faded from view as the light shifted, like it had never existed. He sat with the napkin in his lap, his hands now stained with red wax. From where, he Didn't know. The walls groaned softly, not from movement. From memory, he stood and walked to the glass case at the far end of the room. It had always been sealed. Empty. Just an old display of school awards. But now, behind the warped glass, a mirror. No frame. Just silvering behind old plexiglass. He leaned in, the booth behind him, clear, real. But this time, the seats were filled, children, all facing forward, and in the center seat a girl. Holding a napkin, she turned her head slowly toward him in the foam. Reflection. Her mouth didn't move, but the mirror, FOG, D-do. Breath, from her side. Words began to trace in condensation. Backward. She drew what they made her remember. He stepped back. In his pocket his own. Not the room. Something poked his thigh. He reached in. A folded textbook page. One he hadn't put there. It was brittle, faded, lined paper. The kind used in remedial notebooks. It had a napkin taped to it. Yellowed edges. Crayon sketch. The booth again, but this time only the red mug. Across from it, an empty seat. A sentence scrawled beneath in black ink. Tell her to stop drawing me. The handprint on the glass thickened. The lines widened. Like someone behind. It was pressing harder. The pressure in the room changed. The smell of wax and mildew gave way to something worse. Something chemical, metallic. A hymn played faintly from the vents. Notes off key. Familiar. The line repeated twice. Feed the hands that feed the silence. Then stopped. He turned the napkin over. No date. Just a name, Lucy. But it had been scratched out, and beneath it, in the same waxy red, Subject 94F. There was no record of her ever attending the school, but there were hundreds of napkins. And only one girl ever drew the booth. The pipe didn't hum at first. It pulsed. Beneath the diner booth, through the concrete floor, Raymond had already mapped twice. The pulse vibrated like a trapped vein remembering how to move. He pressed the base of his palm flat against the tile and felt it soft, rhythmic, impossibly slow. Like a heartbeat left behind. He'd found the blueprint in a sealed envelope hidden inside a rusted, electrical panel. Yellowed paper with redacted segments shaped like doorways. One note in faded graphite. Plumbing doesn't match. Do not cut south line. He hadn't cut anything. Just followed. The slab beneath the booth, originally declared solid in both 82 and 95 inspections, had been tampered with. Repoured, but only partially. The corner segment by the mirror had a faint line in the grout. At first glance, decorative. Under a UV penlight, it glowed. Raymond knelt. The hum sharpened the moment the penlight neared the floor. The line, no longer faint, began to illuminate on its own. Pale blue, then red. He blinked. The color change wasn't visible to the eye directly. Only in the reflection. He stood slowly, stepped toward the mirror. The diner was behind him. The booth. The two mugs. Unchanged. But in the reflection, under the booth, a pipe, running parallel to the floor. Glassy, slick. No clamps, no wall bracket. No markings. The pipe shouldn't have been there. The record said, no plumbing beneath that part of the foundation. Nothing beyond the waistline, rerouted 20 years ago. He crouched, this time with the thermal scanner. No heat signature, but a pulse. Not of temperature motion, a low rhythmic bulge in the scan, like pressure building in something with no outlet. He followed the reflection's logic. Not the real floor. The mirror's at the far end of the booth, behind a loose panel meant to look decorative, chrome-edged, 1950s design. He found it. A valve cap. Not metal. Wax. Soft, warm. And sealed with a lock of hair. Curled. Blonde. Still damp. He stepped back. Nausea rising. A drawer beside the sink clicked open. Slowly. He hadn't touched it. Inside, a burnt photo. Warped and curled but not fully destroyed. A girl. 9, maybe 10. Sitting beside a pipe, the same one. It ran behind her like a spine. She was barefoot, wearing a too large uniform, staring at something out of frame. Her hand rested on the pipe, palm flat. The back of the photo read, "Flush. Only at 2:17. Otherwise it remembers." Raymond's hand trembled. The UV light buzzed in his other palm. He aimed it again at the cap. The wax glowed faintly. But what pulsed beneath it? DIDN single quotes D dot. The pulse was gone. He pressed his ear to the floor dot, and then, flush, somewhere. Below, clear, mechanical, final. The sound traveled through concrete like memory through skin quiet, deliberate, undeniable. He checked his watch. 2:17 a.m. His chest tightened. He hadn't flushed anything. He hadn't moved, but someone had. Somewhere in the walls. He moved to the sink. Turned on the faucet. No sound. No water. Just a soft hiss, like breath from behind a door that had waited too long to be opened. He grabbed the flashlight again and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. There running, parallel to the plumbing, was a second pipe, thinner, old copper, but too clean. It ran behind the wall. He followed it. The basement map, the one they'd said was obsolete, match. But only if read in reverse. Every turn made sense, if you assumed the building had mirrored itself after the first incident. Whatever that had. Then the pipe led to a wall. A flat slab. He touched it. Cool, textured, concrete, no plaster, made to look like concrete. Painted decades ago. He pressed. It gave. A small crawl space opened. Just large enough to crawl through. He lowered himself into it. Head first, shoulders scraping each side. The pipe ran beside him, still humming faintly now, like something aware of being followed. At the end, a room, square, tiled in white, not cracked, not old, preserved. And in the center, a drain, a floor grate with initials, scratched beside it. LT-1974. Around the edges, pinkish stains, dried, ancient. Not rust. A mirror stood on the far wall, cracked at the top. But the reflection was wrong. It showed the booth. And someone sitting at it. Not him. The girl from the photo. Now older. Maybe 16, wearing the same oversized uniform. Holding a wrench. Turning the valve. Then smiling. She opened her mouth. In the room, the pipe hissed again. Steam burst from the floor. Great. And a voice. Gentle. Female. Familiar. Don't touch the wax. He turned. No one behind him. But on the wall, where nothing had been before, a single page taped with faded masking tape. A hymn. He seeth the drain and forgetteth not. The red is not water. The red was remembered. And beneath it, scribbled, they built this place over the wrong kind of grave. He looked back down at the pipe. It pulsed once more. Then stopped. He followed it to the final bend, and there, just beneath the corner wall, sealed into a small cavity, the same wax plug. Soft, pale, embedded with human hair, the lock of it curled. Trapped like a last breath sealed in time. He pressed his fingers gently to the wax. It throbbed. Not heat. Heartbeat. His. He drew back. And then on the wall beside the cavity, barely visible beneath the flickering flashlight beam, a message scratched. Into the tile. You flushed it. You flush it every time. He didn't remember. But the pipe did. The receipt wasn't supposed to exist. Raymond found it folded into the spine of a laminated menu tucked behind a page that had stuck to itself with syrup dried 3 decades ago. He hadn't meant to pry it loose. But when he did, it came free with a sound like skin unsticking from skin. At first glance, it was harmless. Pale yellow, ink-faded blue. The kind of generic thermal slip every corner diner used before digital systems took over. But the timestamp May 12, 1995, 2:17 a.m. was too specific. The item purchased, 1 drip coffee, Red Pines roast. Raymond's breath caught. Red Pines. Had discontinued operations in 1962. Burned down in a chemical fire. Lawsuits, never rebuilt. He turned the receipt over. A note scrawled lightly in pencil. Barely visible, still too hot to drink. The handwriting looked recent. Familiar. He checked his notes. The woman who vanished in 2031. Clara Deering had left behind journals. One entry reproduced in her missing persons file was scanned from a stained notepad. He pulled up the image on his phone. The handwriting sloped the same way, same pressure. Same looping lowercase e. She had never been found, but this receipt dated 36 years earlier held her handwriting. Raymond's hands trembled. He rechecked the booth. The mugs were still there, one red, one black. Neither steaming, not anymore. He opened the napkin drawer. Another napkin sketch had appeared. Fresh, the crayons were still warm. This time the table was empty. The mirror behind it was fogged, but in the reflection, 3 seated figures. One of them had Clara's hair. He returned to the receipt. Beneath the timestamp, there was a line of numbers that didn't match any transaction code. 40317. 12/25/94/19. He read it aloud. Nothing happened, but the mirror responded. It cleared, slightly, enough to show the booth not as it was, but as it had been. The upholstery had shifted shades. The stitching changed pattern. The floor tile behind the seat no longer bore a coffee stain. It bore a crack, jagged like a lightning strike. That hadn't been there yesterday. The mirror showed 1984 or 1995. Or neither. He stepped closer. The reflection changed again. The booth sat empty, but the menu on the table didn't match the one he'd just opened. It was laminated, but newer, glossier. And the date on the front page read, May 13th, 2025. Tomorrow. He turned to the real booth. The menu hadn't moved. He opened it. Different items. No breakfast platters. No familiar sandwiches. Just one section. Memory courses. Cream recall. Breaded forgetfulness. The seat of someone else. The last item had no price. No description. Just a single note. Ask your server to be alone. He looked back at the receipt. Folded the corner. Something crinkled inside the menu's back sleeve. A second slip. A photo. Of Clara. Smiling, wearing a uniform. Apron tied crookedly. She stood beside the booth, holding a coffee pot, pouring into a red mug. The man in the seat had no face, just a blur. Raymond's pulse kicked. On the back of the photo, someone had written, May 12, 1995. We didn't meet yet, but you told me to wait, so I waited. He checked the archived reports again. Clara had gone missing in 2031, last seen leaving her job as a hospice nurse. She had no documented employment history before 2007, but the apron in the photo bore a patch. St. Elsabeth's Cafeteria, Ward G, the same name from the sealed basement blueprints. Note Raymond had stood in that cafeteria. It didn't exist anymore. Collapsed in the flood. No records retained. He stared at the menu. Again, tomorrow's date. He flipped to the last page. Nothing but a small handwritten note laminated into the corner. Please do not order what hasn't happened yet. The light above the booth flickered. Once, then again. He turned slowly. The receipt on the table was now unfolded. The handwriting at the bottom had changed. Happy birthday. I kept your seat warm. He stepped back. Looked toward the mirror. The booth was occupied. By him, but older. More tired. Face thin, pale, sitting alone with a red mug in his hands. In the reflection, the light was different, warmer, slightly golden. His older self lifted the mug. Took a sip, nodded. Then reached across the table toward something just out of view. The mirror flickered. And the booth was empty again. He ran to the other side. Nothing there. Just mugs, stale, the scent of burnt paper and something floral, faint and rotting. He heard a whisper, low, mechanical, like something pressed against a recorder too close. You Always come here before it happens. He didn't know whose voice it was, but it landed like a memory. Not his, but stored in his body. He stepped toward the counter. An old drawer beneath the register stuck slightly as he pulled. Inside, another laminated menu, not dated, but visibly newer. The cover bore no title, just a phrase, "Thank you for choosing us again." He flipped to the drink section, only one item, red. Pines roast, served hot, regardless of year. He looked again at the receipt. Now, at the bottom of the slip, ink freshly bleeding, order complete. Do not hand this to yourself. He returned to the booth. The menu now matched the mirror. Same font, same lamination, same line at the bottom of the page. Today's special. The last time you were here. He turned the page. There was only one item. Memory of your own disappearance, served with cream or closure. The mirror fogged again, this time from the inside. Fingerwriting began to appear in streaked loops. 3 words. Check tomorrow's menu. Raymond reached under the seat. There, taped to the underside, another menu laminated. Tomorrow, single quotes, S-date, May 13th, 2025. One item listed. He orders alone, again, and beneath it, scratched faintly into the table's wood grain, something barely legible. No one remembers the first time until it's the last. It began with a flicker no one else saw. Raymond had paused mid-step, tray still in hand, when the lights above the booth blinked slow, like someone dimmed them by thought alone. And in that instant of hesitation, when shadow overtook clarity, the mirror caught something it shouldn't have. A man, seated, alone, legs crossed, back perfectly straight, not eating, not drinking. Just watching. Raymond turned, quick enough to feel embarrassed, but the booth was empty. Both mugs untouched. Condensation tracing lazy, halos beneath them on the table. He glanced back at the mirror, still there. The man's outline held steady, not like a trick of light, more like a memory that refused to leave. Raymond blinked. Once, twice, but the reflection didn't change. He stepped forward slowly until he could see himself faintly overlaid. But the seated man wasn't superimposed. He was seated where Raymond wasn't, not beside him, not behind him, exactly where the booth sat, like he had never left. Raymond reached for his phone, opened the camera, snapped a photo. The preview showed only Raymond, but when he opened the photo, the man appeared. Legs crossed, face indistinct, almost sculpted by fog. But still there. He ran the image through a filter, brightening exposure. The man's outline grew clearer. A dark coat, a silver ring, no name tag, no expression. Just a gaze, aimed through the mirror, not at Raymond. Past him, through him. The mirror pulsed once, subtle like breath fogging glass in reverse. Raymond turned. Slowly, the booth remained empty. But now a drawer in the booth's side had opened, one he had never noticed before. He crouched. Inside, a file, thick, bound in twine stained with what looked like ink, but smelled too metallic. No label. He untied it. Hands trembling. The first page, a redacted interview transcript. Date unknown location, dining ward G. Reflective surveillance log. He returns every cycle. We don't seat him, he just appears. Always in the mirror. Does he speak? Only when the audio is off, but the sound doesn't come from him. Where does it come from? From behind the wall. The next page was a photograph, sealed in plastic. Raymond's stomach lurched. It was a still from security footage, grainy. Timestamped February 17th, 1998. 2 hours 17 minutes and 0 seconds. The man was seated in the booth. Legs crossed, a mug on either side of him. But this time, a hand rested on the table across from him. Just the hand. No body. Small, childlike. In the reflection behind them. A second booth. Empty, yet someone had circled the corner of the image in red ink. There Names scratched into the table beneath the man's mug. Clara Deering. Raymond dropped the file, stumbled. Backed out. The mirror didn't blink, didn't crack, didn't distort. It simply waited. He took the photo again, this time from a wider angle. The man in the mirror sat in the exact position as before. Same legs, same hands, same ring. But now something had changed. His head was tilted slightly. As if listening. And then his lips moved. No sound, but Raymond heard it anyway. Not from the mirror. From behind the booth. Behind the wall. A voice, male, gentle. You always forget the third mug. Raymond turned. There were still two, red. Neither moved, but in the reflection he saw it. A third mug now sat on the table. Clear glass. Full. Steam rising. No hand had placed it. He looked down at the real booth. Only two mugs. He looked up. 3. Raymond stepped back. The mirror didn't show the room anymore. It showed only the booth, only the man, and now the man was turning, slowly, deliberately, toward him, but not in reality, only in reflection. Raymond moved right. The mirror man tracked him. Moved left. Again, the eyes followed. No blink. No shift. In body, just the slow, weightless turn of someone who already knows where you'll go. His breath caught. The lights above the mirror dimmed again, just enough to catch a new detail. A fingerprint on the inside of the glass, upside down, pressing outward. The same size as Raymond's, but not placed by him. Second fingerprint appeared beside it. Then a third. Then the smear of a palm. As if someone inside the glass was trying to crawl out, but too late. Too rehearsed. This had happened before. He stepped closer. The fog on the glass thickened, and there etched faintly, almost apologetically, was a hymn. They wait where no time flows. The booth is always seated. The customer never leaves. He only watches. Below it, scratched into the frame, a phrase. Ask them why you remember this. Raymond closed his eyes, tried to remember what day it was. Couldn't. Tried to remember how long he'd been in the diner. Couldn't. Tried to remember if he had ever left. The mirror whispered again. This time, not in words. A looping sound. A bell. A mug being placed. A chair pulling out. Over and over. Every 23 seconds, he recorded it, then played it back. But on the recording, a different sound emerged. A voice, just under the bell. He was here when they closed the wing. He sat through the evacuation. He asked for cream. Raymond searched the counter. The receipt printer blinked. UNPROMPTED. It ejected a slip. 2:17 a.m. Reflection seated. No total. No itemized list. Just one note at the bottom. Do not clear his table. He turned back to the mirror. The booth now showed 4 mugs. One on the floor. Something dark pooling around it. The man remained seated. Same gaze. Same silence. But in the space beside him, another figure now sat. Blurred. Unformed. A presence in posture only. But Raymond recognized the shape. It was his. Seated. Watching the watcher. He looked down again. Only 2 mugs. But on the table's edges phone. It VIBRATED. New file saved. 03_reflect_3 mugs.mov. He hadn't recorded a video. He opened it. The screen showed the booth. Live. But from inside the mirror, the angle showed Raymond now. Standing. Looking back at the camera. But in the reflection on the screen, a third mug lifted, tilted. And the man smiled. A single frame before the video glitched and cut. When he looked back to the mirror, the man was gone, but his mug remained. Full. Steaming. And across the rim, a ring of cream. No one had poured it. No one had ordered it. And on the table, carved with fingernail precision, the customer never leaves. You just replace him. No one remembered hiring her. She wore the right uniform, collar pressed, apron tied just slightly too tight at the waist. No namatag, just a loop of stitched thread where one should have been. Her shoes were the kind given out by the state. Quiet, rubber-soled, with identical wear patterns across dozens of facilities. The kind they'd banned after the lawsuit. She arrived on a Tuesday. No clock in, no onboarding. No W-4, just a notepad already half-used and a pencil the color of dried blood. She stood behind the counter before anyone noticed her standing at all. Raymond had been the first to speak to her. He didn't remember what he said. He only remembered the way she responded. Table 6-2 grilled cheese, no crusts. Coffees. Brewing cold again. It was word for word from a 1984 tape he'd listened to 3 nights earlier. Same cadence. Same pause between crusts and coffee. He hadn't told anyone about the tape, and yet she repeated it exactly, without smile, without wink. As if pulled from a recording that had never been turned off, she moved strangely. Not jerky or robotic, just rehearsed. Like her route through. The booth aisles had already been walked 1,000 times by someone else. She never turned fully. Her head pivoted no more than necessary. Her eyes stayed level. She didn't blink when spoken to, only when alone. Raymond started recording her shifts. He told himself it was for documentation, audit purposes. But it was guilt. A creeping feeling that they were complicit in something old. Something still unfinished. The tapes didn't capture her voice. Only silence. Long, empty hiss between static. But the image showed her clearly, mouth moving. Pencil writing. No audio. Until 2:17 a.m. on every tape. At 2:17 exactly, her voice came through, only once. The same phrase, whispered beneath a mechanical hum. Orders taken. Tell them not to. Clean the table. Then silence resumed. She didn't eat. Didn't touch the staff fridge. She never left through the front door. No one saw her enter or exit, but the customers began repeating her. One man came 3 days in a row. Sat at the booth by the mirror. Spoke her words before she did. Coffee's brewing cold again. Then again, in his sleep. His wife recorded. It posted it on a forum that vanished 48 hours later. Every link returned a 410 error. Gone. Like the building it came from. The floor manager, 27 years on staff, veteran of the health inspection cover-up, snapped. Found the shift ledger she signed. Page after page. Same name, Mtellinger. She hadn't aged. Not in the records. Not in the booth. She wore the same apron. Same pressed shirt. Same knot in the shoelaces. Ed poured gasoline on the ledger. Lit it. In the kitchen sink. The fire didn't crackle. It sang. A slow, toneless hymn in a woman's voice. Not from Ed, not from the speakers. From the ashes. Raymond watched the smoke rise, soft, almost sweet. He coughed, so did the others, but she kept working. Tray balanced. Notepad flipping. UNBOTHERED. The next morning, the sink was cold. The ledger was gone. But across the floor, where ash had scattered, gray and smooth, the soot spelled something. Letters. Scorched in the shape of finger-traced words. She never stopped taking orders. The phrase pulsed beneath the tile like heat. Raymond couldn't look away. The letters hadn't been written. They had remembered themselves. He ran inventory that day. Out of habit. Found something else in the supply closet. A shoe. Child size. Patent leather. Strap broken. Toe scuffed. Inside. Folded and warped by humidity. A hymn. They serve to forget. They eat to remember. She writes it all down. It was page 94 from the chapel hymnal, torn from the same book he'd seen in the sealed case 3 chapters ago. He checked the camera again. She was still on screen. Pour in coffee. But the date on the feed was wrong. August 17, 1984. Not today. Not possible. He checked the settings. Nothing wrong. Except the customer in the booth was him. Younger. Clean shaven. Shirt he hadn't worn in a decade. legs crossed, hands folded. Watching her, she leaned down and said something to him. Her mouth moved, slowly. He couldn't hear it. The feed was mute. He zoomed in, watched her lips form the words again, and then his current phone buzzed. A video saved. He hadn't recorded anything. The file was named M_Tellinger_voice dump. He opened it. Just static. Then, "You told me not to stop," whispered, fragile, breath caught between memory and grief. He turned back to the booth. She was gone. So was the customer. But 3 mugs remained. And 1 notepad. He opened it. The handwriting inside was his. He didn't remember writing it. The first page read, "Grilled cheese. No crusts. Coffee's cold again." The next, "He won't eat until she repeats it." The last, "Ashes don't lie. They write." The pages disintegrated as he turned them. By the time he reached the last page, there was only soot. And in it on the floor again, traced in perfect finger lines. She took the order again. They lowered the floodlights just past midnight. No press. No permits. Just 4 city workers brought in off shift, given cash in envelopes with no return address and instructions typed on a faded letterhead. Wolf Holdings, basement floor. Reconfiguration. None of them had heard of Wolf Holdings. One said the company had dissolved in 1997. Another remembered the name from an old client file, but swore it was on a school district invoice, not commercial property. The booth had been uncovered 6 days earlier. The demolition team was there to remove pipes, just routine. But beneath a warped layer of tiling, hidden under 6 inches of concrete, they found it intact. A 1950s diner booth, 2 seats, 1 bolted mirror. Clean, untouched. Still warm. The coffee cups on the table steamed for 9 hours. No mold. No insects. No explanation. They called in local code enforcement. The file was redacted within the hour, on paper. The basement had no such room, and yet it was there. Eleanor Park was called back in, former archival clerk for the Department of Urban Infrastructure, now retired. She hadn't entered a government building in 14 years. She said she left because of a drawer that wasn't in the plans. A drawer that locked from the inside. But when they showed her the booth, her voice changed. Not panic. Not awe, resignation. "I cataloged that table in 1980, she said, pressing her hand to the polished wood. "It wasn't meant to be found." They didn't ask how she knew. She walked out 2 minutes later, shoes clicking over cement. She didn't say goodbye. The lights flickered as she left. Power hadn't been connected yet. They poured concrete that night. It didn't set. 12 hours passed, then 20, then 72. The top dried, but the layer beneath stayed wet, soft, breathing. As if the booth was refusing burial. One worker, Luis, father of 4, former electrician, quit on the spot after hearing something beneath the mixer. Not voices, not cries. Typing. A slow, deliberate keystroke rhythm from under the wet cement. Like a ledger being updated in real time. He took off his gloves, set them down gently, and whispered, "She's still writing it." When asked who, he couldn't answer. He just wept. Later he said he couldn't remember what the booth looked like. He only remembered its shape in his dreams. By day 5, cracks appeared around the base. Hairline, at first, then deeper. One moved visibly when no one was touching it. The mirror remained untouched, but what it reflected, a different diner. A different decade. The booths were green instead of red. The menus had QR codes. One of the salt shakers had a brand that didn't exist until 2023. They unplugged the lights. The reflection stayed bright. Someone placed their hand on the glass. A second hand appeared beside it, identical. A match. No one else had touched it. The power was finally cut. They flickered again at 2:17. A.M. Every night. No matter the circuit, no matter the breaker. One security guard brought in to monitor the site saw a drawer open beneath the booth table. One that hadn't been there before. He described something inside, a photo. Burnt at the edges, 2 children. 1 shoe missing. The face of the boy scratched out, not by age but by force. He blinked. The drawer was closed. He tried to leave. His badge didn't scan. When the team returned hours later, they found a single child's shoe beside the guard station. Patent leather. Scuffed at the toe. Stamped inside. Property of Linwood Juvenile Trust, 1981. That facility had burned down 44 years ago. No survivors were recorded, but a hymn was found in the guard's chair, torn from a chapel book. Page 94. The same. One Raymond had seen. They serve to forget. They eat to remember. A redacted file surfaced 3 days later. Court case from 1980. Title: Park v. Wolf Diner Holdings. Et al. Sealed. Dismissed. Plaintiffs listed as minors A through F. 1 line left unredacted in the notes. Child F testified booth mirror did not reflect present-day room. The page was signed by a judge declared legally dead in 1982. That same signature reappeared last week, stamped in ink that hadn't faded. On a fresh motion to seal the basement again. The judge's name? Harold T. Neal. Deceased. Cremated. Funeral recorded. But the court stamp was active. The handwriting matched. And the new documents, all signed by the same initials, :M.T. No full name given. Just those 2 letters. Looping. Careful. The construction crew brought in afterward refused to enter. 1 worker hired through a subcontractor. Name unlisted walked in. 7 minutes later. Came out barefoot. He had no recollection of entering. He just said, "It doesn't feel past, it feels filed." He left, wasn't paid. No one saw him again. The booth stayed. The lights kept flickering. And in the county records office during a routine audit, a clerk flagged something. A motion. Buried beneath financial approvals and zoning requests. Stamped. July 9, 2025. Authorizing permanent access to the basement booth for heritage continuation purposes. Signed, Harold T. Neal, witnessed him telling her, filed under case. #48D03. The case was closed in 1980, but reopened that morning. The clerk printed it. Highlighted the signatures. Left the folder on the supervisor's desk. An hour later, the ink melted. Paper curled, but 1 sentence remained scorched into the underside of the folder. The booth wasn't meant to be found. But it remembered who looked for it. The diner was empty, but the air still hummed with heat. Beneath the kitchen's fluorescent lights, the last cup of coffee steamed dark rich, curling slowly upward like some unspoken promise. The mug had sat there for hours. No one had touched it. The kitchen staff had long gone. No one had cleaned it, and yet it never stopped steaming. Raymond lingered at the counter, watching. The only sound left was the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the soft tap of his fingers on the wood. He couldn't recall how long he'd been standing there. Minutes, hours, days. He looked at the coffee again, the steam rising and curling toward the ceiling in slow spirals. No matter how many times he checked, it never stopped. It was the same cup, same brand, same mug as before. The label was faint now, but he knew it by heart. Red Pines, a coffee that hadn't been sold in decades. A coffee that hadn't been roasted in decades. Yet here it was, hot, waiting. Raymond felt a tug behind his eyes, a pull at the back of his skull. It was like the coffee itself was beckoning him, whispering things he couldn't quite hear but knew were there. The diner persisted like a scar that refused to heal. He'd seen it every day, had worked there for nearly 20 years. But there was something different now, something off, as if it had never moved, but had been waiting for something to return. He couldn't remember when the diner had started feeling like this. He couldn't remember when the flickers of light had begun, timed so precisely at 2:17 a.m. Each time, every time. No one talked about it, not aloud. He felt the weight of it pressing in. The heavy silence. The empty booth by the window, always empty, always waiting. His footsteps were too loud on the tile. The light overhead buzzed, but the fixture never dimmed, never flickered at the right time. The clock on the wall had stopped once, years ago. It had been replaced. But still, it never seemed to move right. It always stayed just a little too fast. Or too slow. It never really matched the time. Raymond rubbed his eyes. The steam still rose. The door opened with the soft sound of the bell jingling above it. It was another customer, another nameless face walking in. He had seen this happen before. He always did. Each face familiar and strange in the same breath. This was the routine. This was the story he always told, but it felt different today. The man sat down at the booth by the window. Same seat, same booth, always the same. Raymond didn't ask what he wanted. He just poured the coffee. He didn't even need to check the clock anymore. It was always 2:17 a.m. when it happened. The same as the night before. The same as every night before. The man took the mug, cradling it in both hands. Raymond felt the pull again. The quiet, the pressure in his chest, the question he couldn't quite remember. What do you want? Raymond heard himself say, though it felt strange, too sudden, too real. His voice cracked as the question tumbled out. The man looked up. His face was pale, his eyes distant, but locked on Raymond in a way that sent a chill down his spine. His lips moved, but the sound never came. Not from his mouth, but from somewhere behind. Cream? The man whispered. The voice was a hollow echo, faded and sharp at the same time. Raymond didn't respond. He simply watched as the man's fingers tightened around the mug. The porcelain creaked under the weight of something he couldn't understand. The coffee was the same. The same as every other night. He thought he saw something flicker. In the Fendi. Reflection. The man wasn't alone. The woman sat across from him, right there in the mirror. Not in the booth, just in the reflection. She wasn't real, but she was there, staring back at him. Her eyes hollow, expression too still. No one ever sat in that booth. Raymond blinked. The woman was gone. He looked down. The mug sat untouched. Coffee was still steaming. Nothing had changed, but everything had shifted. The man sipped his coffee slowly, his gaze never leaving Raymond. The silence stretched between them, as if it were a thing alive, a space filled with unanswered questions that neither of them had the courage to ask. The door jangled again. Another customer. The bell, soft and hollow. He glanced up. There was no one there. Only the girl. The same one from earlier, from before. When had she come in? She walked past him. Her footsteps were too light, too quiet. She stopped at the booth. The woman sat there again. Not a woman. Just a silhouette. Her hair tangled, her face lost behind the veil of reflection. She turned her head, not to the man, not to Raymond, but to the window. Her eyes were too wide, too still. The man smiled, a slow, careful movement. A grin that stretched, unnaturally. Wide. Raymond could see it in the reflection, the darkening curve of his lips, the way his eyes slid downward. The clock above the door ticked too loudly now. And then, as if time itself had decided to stop just for them, the coffee in the man's mug tipped over, spilling over the table. The liquid pooled like liquid glass, spilling, breaking against the cracks in the booth's varnish. He didn't move. The woman in the reflection remained still. The silence. The stillness. And then the man's hand reached out, slowly, tentatively. The mug, but there were four now. The woman behind him had not moved, had not spoken. Her hands rested in her lap. She did not drink, but she still sat. Raymond's breath caught in his throat. Another mug. No one had poured it. The customer hadn't asked for it. He hadn't even noticed, but Raymond saw the new mug, the dark stain of coffee, and the slight curve of the handle, gently turned toward him. The woman never moved. Her face still locked in that strange emptiness. Raymond stood frozen, a slight shift in the air. A movement from behind the counter. Something whispered, a voice too close. Cream? The question rang like a bell in his skull. But when he turned, the booth was empty. The girl was gone. The man was gone. The coffee still steamed. And then he saw it. In the reflection. The table was full again. The booth no longer empty. 4 mugs. Each one freshly filled. Each one steaming. Each one bearing a name, and one of them was his. Raymond's breath stopped. On the counter, the mug bore a smudge. Not his, not anyone's, just a faint fingerprint pressed into the rim of the coffee cup. No one remembered pouring it. And beneath it, in faint traces of condensation, "Who took your order?" A shudder ran down his spine. The steam rose higher, heavier. He felt it close in. Felt it pressing on him in a way he couldn't explain. The cold on his neck. The heat from the cups. The diner was still. The air too thick. And then at the edge of the reflection, a final shift. A shadow leaned over the booth. And the question echoed, "Cream?" But Raymond didn't answer. The reflection never stopped looking.